Right. If you're not sure how the
Mhm.
visual is going to go, because some people have a really strong visual mind's eye where they can see it very clearly and they
Yeah.
can kind of conceptualize as they're writing. They're like, oh, well, if I, like think about like when is this taking place and is it cold out? And talking to the writer early on, the artist writer team talking early on to flesh some of these things out is great. But a lot of times you get a script and you're just like, the artist receives a script and they have to figure these things out to make sure um like, or they have to do it. The writer's like, "Oh, you do it what you want with it," and
Mhm.
the artist's like, "Okay, well, I'll kind of figure it out." And there's nothing wrong with that either. But it just there's a
It's different.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Doing something being like, "Oh, yeah, they were walking along the beach," and you're like, "Oh, okay, shorts and a t-shirt," but I'm like in my mind, it's like, "But it was winter." But I don't specifically tell you that. You're gonna go possibly a different route than what I was thinking if, the writer isn't clear with those kind of particulars. Um, the season, what they're wearing, what's going on around them. Those things sometimes you have in your head, you can picture it, but if you don't put it down on paper, no one's going to read your mind, right? And that's when the illustrators comes out and you're like, here you go. And it's like, oh, maybe I should have specified that it was a cold winter beach walk, not a summer's day.
yeah. It's practice. This isn't something that you're gonna as if you're a new writer, you
Hmm.
may not think about these things, and don't worry if you're like, "Oh, man, like, what, like, I don't even that's not even on my radar. I don't even think about, like, what
Yeah.
the clothing that the person's wearing and whether or not that's accurate to the time. Oh, man, like, this is all practice the more
Hmm.
you write, the more you collaborate, with different not only with an artist, but with multiple different artists, right? Because every
100%.
artist is going to approach things a bit differently, and therefore, um, things that you hadn't quite thought of or approached in a certain way will be approached differently by all different artists, right?
Absolutely. And that's why it's always good, whether it be an artist, another writer, someone that you trust, to like, take a look at this and let me know what you think. Ask me questions because they're going to pick things out that you might have instinctively known the answer to, but you didn't explicitly explain it. Right. So they might, ask that question being like, oh, so it was hot? You're like, oh, yeah, of course it was hot. It's like, oh, you didn't actually really specify that anywhere other than this one little, like, offhanded comment 3 pages in. It's like, "Oh, right, I maybe needed to make that an earlier statement so that the artist doesn't realize after drawing, 3 pages that, 'Oh, wait, it was really hot and I've been drawing it as winter.'" And sometimes you just need those other people to look at your stuff and ask questions. So don't be offended when somebody asks a question, especially when you're like, "Oh, of course, how could you not know that?" They clearly didn't. So maybe you could have added a line or just an, comment in the margins of like, just so that there's bioluminescence in this world. Oh, okay, great. Now I can rethink of that while I'm creating it because I know that you've thought of it. So always you get better at it the more and more you do of it. And these exercises are great because we're doing everything 100% live in that there wasn't like I've had time to think about this ahead of time. So the questions that are coming up are real time questions. And it's forcing both of us to think on our feet and kind of figure out the little gaps that we need to answer.
Yeah. I'm just I'm just surprised it took me so long to go, "Oh, that's why you might do a fantasy story versus a sci-fi story," is when you're like,
Yeah.
lacking any real, like, scientific, soft or hard, um, like, facts or theories, right? Um, yeah, I think that, I was gonna say that, when you're doing these stories or you're
Hmm.
trying to figure them out, yeah, for sure there's no uh don't feel embarrassed to ask or admit that you didn't think of something, like as you were doing it. One of the things I think happens too is this. It's kind of like when you have a conversation with somebody and you're thinking about this conversation and starting in the middle of the story, and the person that you're talking to isn't in your head, so they have no idea what you're talking about. And so telling a story requires you to be aware that you've been thinking about it for however many days, weeks,
Yes.
months, lifetime. And so you figured out a lot of little nuances of it, and you figured out, like, the plot of it and all that stuff. And so when you're explaining or writing it down, you may not realize that you're forgetting things to put down because it's in your brain, right? You've just kind of made an assumption or something. And then when you convey it to the person that you're going to share the story with, they have to go, "That's great, but you're only giving me part of the story. I need more." Right? And that's
Yes.
where I'm going to keep on going back to that emotional beat
Mhm.
that you gave me for the script for the
Yeah.
door when we were laying it out initially. And I think it's a great idea for writers to do this, which
Mhm.
is one aspect of um, writing a story. It's kind of like when you're doing a script, it's for you, it's the writer, it's the artist, it's the team. I mentioned this before,
Mhm.
but having like if you are talking to your team and they're like going, "Well, what's the emotional state? Like, what am I getting for," maybe it is a
Yeah.
good idea to go, "Okay, I'm going to actually put a little paragraph or a little sentence uh, for each page as to like the emotional uh, feeling you're
Yeah.
going to get," because that will color the whole page in a way that'll give you, like, instead of when you're acting out that scene through drawing and maybe making that person like emoting, you're going to know that emotional beat a little bit more strongly, even if it's described in the panel or the um, like the script breakdown per panel, having a sense overall of what's going to happen in that scene, not necessarily on that page, but in that scene, right? So the scene could be 3 or 4
100%.
panels, and there could be a couple more panels after that, but you've already gone to another scene from that point, right? So we always say here we don't know what we're going to be doing next. Like this is all kind of
Mhm.
spontaneous and unrehearsed, and so we're learning about process and creativity as you're learning about it, right? Like
Mhm.
this, a lot of what we're talking about, it's just um, ideas that are happening in real time that we're just expanding upon based off of our prior knowledge and experience of
Yeah.
process of storytelling, but also we're discovering things we're going, "Oh, like I just discovered the whole fantasy sci-fi thing." I mean, it's an obvious thing when I've said it out loud, and now I feel kind of silly about like everybody who's ever going to watch this is going to go, "This guy just figured that out. How long has he been drawing?" Right? But I don't really draw a lot of fantasy. I've
No.
always steered into more the real world. Maybe the reason being is I for I like having those like things that I have to like research and figure out.
Mhm.
There is something there, now that I've kind of um, thought about it a little bit in the middle of this episode. I'm going, well, maybe I do want to do a little bit more fantasy work because if it means that I can really just play around with anything without worry of like, is it based off of any kind of like scientific or historical
Yeah.
kind of foundation, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's something both freeing and kind of overwhelming with going in more the fantastical route because you can go anywhere, so you have to kind of self-impose rules on you because they're not the universe hasn't done that yet. But because of that, you can go anywhere, right? Like, like what we're doing right now, when you take out the need for it to be accurate to certain things, you're suddenly like, "Oh, wow, well, it could be huge shrimp that they're riding that they grew to the size or whatever it is," because suddenly the boundaries aren't there. And when you mix kind of like a sci-fi fantasy together, you get some really cool things, right? Like there's some elements that still exist in some semblance of, science, etc., but you just push the limits into completely out there ideas, and it can be really fun. You can do a lot of really fun stuff with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that putting it in that way, wrapping it in that way makes it more appealing to me than the way I'd always looked at it before, which is like fantasy is always to me like sword and sorcery type of stuff
Yeah.
or like
Yeah,
not
exactly.
the
Elves and, that
yeah.
kind of a world. Yeah. Whereas I've always looked at fantasy as just removing removing the need to be firmly inside of some form of reality, right? So it's not
Oh,
necessarily going fantastical to the point of, magic, but it's just doing things that you're like, well, this doesn't really have a basis in science, but it does make it just that much more interesting to stretch it that much further.
yeah. Well, yeah, and so now it's more or less a matter of going, okay, so how yeah, like this I guess is a good example. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
so we're you know, I would say that we're starting this in a very fantastical way, but as I'd said prior, like doesn't mean that we can't actually go, well, wait, is this based off of like a specific place
Mhm.
where there is some kind of um like, there are super large shrimp, or there's, light
Yes.
pho the phosphorescence that are quite prominent, and, like, there's certain kinds of biochemical reactions that can cause superheated, explosions or something, like, there could be all that kinda stuff, so then we can always go back, see if we can find them, and then use those as, like, like, to add a little bit more, reality-based detail to it, right?
Exactly, and it's always neat if you can find a shred of reality, right, that you could pull off of, like, if there was a certain place we could specifically find that had an underwater volcano that was giving off heat and light in a really interesting way and be like, "This civilization built itself around that." Okay, we have some semblance of reality in there, and then we go beyond it and be like, "And because of this, they have these oversized shrimp that they ride, and they've learned to harness bioluminescence and stuff that is definitely fantastical, but there was that shred of, possibility, right? That's always a really interesting place is if you keep just that little bit of like, we did put enough trueness and science in here that maybe somewhere this could be possible.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's a really cool. I'll have to, like, think about that a little bit more, and try to see how that opens up other story possibilities for me, right?
Mhm.
I've not really thought about it in that way before.
Well, there you go, a whole new genre to explore.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, right? Um, okay, so just to go into, like, a little bit of the, what I'm doing here,
Mhm.
so essentially, I'm actually thinking I want to make this, let's see, this layer here, I'm gonna actually darken. There's a couple different ways I can darken them. I can just, if anybody's familiar with Photoshop, I can go into color overlay, which is an adjustment layer, and then actually darken it a little bit so you can
Mm.
see. Um, this would be good. Um, and then what's happening here, right? I can make it so that I'm creating a mask, and any place where it's overlapping onto what's in front of it, I can remove it, right? Mask it out essentially, so that we can see the characters a little bit more clearly, right?
It's
And
neat, it's got a great energy to it. Um, I love that, made that decision to add in that kind of like oversized fish shrimp that it's riding and just those like elements, I think give so much to the story because now suddenly you're like, where are we and what is happening? Right. It's now you're really starting to look at all of these aspects and there's just so much more storytelling in it now with these, invented weapons and they've managed to harness sea life to help them fight the bad guys and stuff. It's really fun.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So now I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, since it is dark
Mhm.
here, I want to make it so that it feels like they're at the very least um, surrounded in darkness. There's all different ways I can approach this digitally. Um, if you were doing this traditionally, I've mentioned this prior many times. You can work like take like a transparent paper and do different like think about like doing the background separately from the midground from the foreground, and therefore uh, when you are ready, you can superimpose them together just to see, what it looks like. And then you can, as I said, you'll have those three pieces of tracing paper overlapping. It should be light enough that then you take another piece of paper and put it on top. And then with like a light box or something, then you draw the whole scene together. But you've been able to, make those adjustments prior when you've done it. Like if you wanted to change things in the background, you can erase, and once you've
Mhm.
seen what it looks like overlapped, you can like erase some certain aspects of it, or like adjust it to make it work a little bit better for the composition, right? So there are for sure things you can do um, in a traditional fashion that I'm doing digitally here.
And I love that you're adding that darkness around it because for one, that's my nightmare. The deep dark water with like all around you. And from the storytelling point of view, it does so much, right? Because now you're really seeing that like they're glowing and anywhere that they're looking is lit up and everything around them is dark. Um, it really does say so much about this civilization and their kind of technology that they've created.
Yeah, and I mean, because we are doing this in a very quick manner, I don't know if we have that other drawing that I've been doing for the last couple weeks, and I'd love to finish it, right? This looks like another one I may wanna work on more, but I don't know if we're gonna necessarily for next week, if we're gonna do the same thing, or if we're gonna come up with a like, or continue this, I should say, or
Mhm.
if we're going to come up with a new story or something like that. Or, I mean, one thing we haven't done before as well is like maybe coming up with a different angle on this, like actual visual angle, and so
Well,
you know,
that's neat.
yeah,
That could be actually kind of neat to do sort of either a different angle or a different part of the story, right? Like what were they doing before this happened? Right? Like what was their home like in that moment before this thing erupted in the middle of it? Um, because it is kind of neat now that we sort of dug into this idea of this sort of civilization that lives on this sort of fantastical end of things. Um, it it leaves many possibilities open.
yeah. Well, I mean, what I would actually think about doing here is um, maybe doing like an actual like sequential page, right? So this could
Mhm.
be the splash, the thing that happens, like where they're hearing like some kind of rumble as they're working their kelp farms, and they're like,
Yeah.
where is that coming from? And then all of a sudden, this is what ends up coming down and um, disrupting everything that they're doing. Uh, but
Yeah.
like they could always, we could always see what led up to it at that point, right?
Well, exactly, and, like, even what you've designed of this kind of creature, like, it looks like it's got, like, many mouths on it and stuff like that, like, what do they do? Um, are they gonna eat things? Are they gonna, spit venom out at them? Like, it feels like there's, so much potential to explore what this thing is and what it's about to do to them because, again, because it's based in fantasy, it could go anywhere, right? Like, it could bust open and an army of little things could come flying out of it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, I kind of feel it's like a creature that's like almost like got like a tentacle, but you're right. Who knows? It could be like a Trojan horse type scenario,
Yeah, it could have a
right?
bunch of things inside of it that, are coming out that are like snake-like things that are gonna bust their bioluminescent helmets on, and then it becomes dark, like, I don't know. Um There's just because of how we have done this, there's infinite angles we could take it, and the good and bad of that is there's infinite angles we could take it. So, deciding kind of what happens next is an interesting conversation and premise, because we've set something up, but we haven't necessarily explained either what happened before or what's about to happen after.
Yeah. So I'm debating. We're at almost 50 minutes. Should I go and do some line art? I mean, it could take a while, or should I is this a good place for us to pause and,
Yeah,
like
I think let's leave it with this and digest it. Because it's like we said, it's gone some really interesting ways. And from, a simple sentence at the beginning where I just was kind of like, underwater kingdom under attack, we've really got something neat.